Brought to you by Discovery Invest, the formula for successful investing. Brought to you by Discovery Invest, the formula for successful investing.
Good morning, Bonnie. The day we've all been waiting for, a budget day, has finally arrived.
We're going to hear from Pravin Gordhan and what plans he has as far as fiscal discipline and policy is for South Africa. There's been a lot of analysis and counter-analysis regarding where we get the 28 billion, where this budget is going to go, but all that time we'll tell at slightly afternoon today.
Lastly, will you be watching the budget later today, or what are you expecting there?
Well, I'll be presenting results, but definitely thereafter I'll be watching the budget.
Carbon tax, good or positive for your operations?
Well, I think the effect would have to be assessed, but will not be substantial.
So now, small businesses, you head the franchising unit there at ABSA. So what should they be expecting Gordhan to say later on today?
Last year, the department was allocated, just over 400 million rand, to support small and medium enterprises. We would like to see, if that gets increased, and to what extent, because that then determine, what would be available in the kit.
South Africa has this average VAT of 14%, which is lower than most African economies. Is this a low-hanging fruit that Gordhan is going for?
Well, the temptation, to increase it will always be high. So remember that there's about 28 billion shortfall, on the fiscus, so naturally the minister would be looking at all avenues, to be able to beef up the purse.
So just give us your recommendation on how NHI could be funded.
We are left with options from tax. We can't just shift around money to get enough funding, because NHI would be the single biggest expenditure item coming from the budget.
The big day is here, D-Day essentially, but perhaps it needs to start with a B, because it's budget day here in South Africa. What about the budget? Does that play a factor into your long-term investment objectives? And what are you hoping to hear from Pravin Gordhan later today?
Of course, as a tax-paying citizen and a patriot at that, we, in terms of collection of revenues from SARS and the budget that's going to come out today, we expect basically, the norm, no surprises, no big surprises, in line with inflation. And, again, the guys in the higher end are going to take the beating rather than the guys in the bottom end. Because I hear, murmurs out there that people are expecting an increase in VAT. When you increase VAT, you're actually hurting the guys who are below the food chain.
Clearly, if we do see a percentage increase there, it will have ripple effects, which will also play into inflationary pressures.
I don't mind paying more tax. I would prefer not to, obviously. As I said, it's a grudge payment. If I felt that I was contributing to a country that is doing better than it is at the moment.
I really need assistance with keeping up with my expenses. Sometimes I struggle to keep up with the rent here, which is 3,000 rand. Sometimes I'm in debt areas and I can't afford to rent. But because I stayed here for a while and the landlord trusts me, he lets me pay bit by bit.
Minister Gordhan is being very disciplined in how government is adhering to those targets. But the result is that we've still got low growth.
Now joining us to discuss the investment expectations is Rob Johnson, Head of Investments at Nedgroup Investments. He joins us via Skype.
There's a number of ways that what happens today can impact our industry. If there is an increase in taxes, which will generally mean that there's a lower amount of discretionary savings, which will mean people aren't putting as much money away.
Increase in personal income tax for high income earners could be a way to plug the revenue shortfall.
Logically, if you just look at it economically, it can be an effect that lower demand as a result of a sugar tax can lead to lower employment.
What I see that we're all drinking water here, so we shouldn't be too affected by that. Yes, Treasury has to raise this 28 billion rand, but government has to cut 20 billion rand in order to avoid fiscal slippage. So where do you see Gordhan making the chops here?
A big place for him to make the chop is certainly the wage bill. The wage bill eats close to 40% of the budget, and that's the biggest chunk of him for him to cut the wage bill. But at the same time, there's room for him to announce a how he will reorganize management of SOEs. There's a lot of wastage that goes in our SOEs.
Currently, if you look in South Africa, the SOEs are not really achieving what their mandate.
We pay billions over to our SACU partners that we simply cannot afford any longer. We need to renegotiate that agreement to make it cheaper for South Africa.
South Africa belongs to all who live in it. And in drafting our constitution, this was a central foundational principle, and the values of freedom, dignity, and equality are embedded in our law and in our polity. 95% of wealth is in the hands of 10% of the population. 35% of the labor force are unemployed or have given up hope of finding work. Despite our progress in education, over half of all children in grade 5 cannot yet read adequately in any language. Our growth has been too slow, just 1% a year in real per capita terms over the past 25 years, well below that of countries such as Brazil, Turkey, Indonesia, India, and China. These are our realities. Expenditure is within the envelope projected in last year's budget and at the MTBPS. An additional 28 billion rands will be raised in taxes. You'll hear in a moment how it affects you. The budget deficit for 2017-18 will be 3.1% of GDP, in line with our fiscal consolidation commitments. And government debt will stabilize at about 48 to 49% of GDP over the next 3 years. Our expectation at this stage is that GDP growth will increase from 0.5% in the past year to 1.3% in 2017, and will continue to improve very moderately over the medium. Ditau Khedi Shumshisana Dikha Bolaya Nare. If lions work as a team, they will bring down even a buffalo. $3.9 billion rands for small, medium, and micro enterprises and cooperatives. 4.2 billion rands for industrial infrastructure in special economic zones and industrial parks, 1.9 billion rands for broadband implementation, 3.9 billion rands for the CSIR, an additional 494 million for tourism promotion, an additional 266 million to support the aquaculture sector and realize the goals of the oceans economy, Pakisa operation, and spending on agriculture, rural development, and land reform amounting to nearly 30 billion rands by 2019-2020. Effective implementation of these and other programs and initiatives will set us on a higher growth trajectory than currently projected. Progress in engagements between government, the business sector, trade unions, and social partners generally is imperative. The litmus test of our programs must be what do they do to create jobs, eliminate poverty, and narrow the inequality gap. Transformation must be mass-based, benefiting the most disadvantaged South Africans through the creation of new assets, capabilities, and opportunities to build real livelihoods. Slow economic growth has held us back, and so decisive steps are needed to strengthen confidence, investment, and growth. Acting too quickly to reduce the deficit would harm service delivery, delay economic recovery, and compromise tax revenue collection. But to ignore our fiscal targets will result in interest rate hikes, unsustainable commitments, and credit rate downgrades. 149 billion rands needs to be borrowed in the year 2017-2018. Government debt now stands at 2.2 trillion rands, or about 50% of GDP. Interest payments are a rising share of expenditure, as I've just indicated, and by acting now to stabilize debt, we will ensure that future generations will not pay for today's expenses some 20 or 30 years hence. We will continue to safeguard expenditure that protects poor households. It is only right that if households and firms face tough choices in balancing their income and expenses, the same disciplines must be applied in public expenditure as well. In other words, that which we expect the public to do, we in government must also do. So having said that we will spend 1.56 trillion rands and that we will borrow 149 billion rands, where does the rest of the money come from? It comes from taxes, and where does the 28 billion rand increase in taxes come from? The main tax proposals are, honorable members, a new top personal income tax rate of 45% for those with taxable incomes above 1.5 million rands. I thought you'll clap for that. Because this is what you call progressive taxation. Those who earn more pay more. Relief will be provided in the affordable housing market, and this is an important measure we are taking to support people in the middle income groups through an increase in the threshold above which transfer duty is paid. Or put it the other way, in the past, if you bought a house for 750,000 rands or less, no transfer duty was paid. And as the new tax year starts, if you buy a house for 900,000 rands and less, no transfer duty is to be paid. South Africa intends to sign a multilateral instrument this year which will assist in the updating of treaties and will reduce the scope for aggressive tax avoidance activities. Applications to the Special Voluntary Disclosure Program have once again been initiated. SARS has already received disclosures of 3.8 billion rands in foreign assets, which will yield revenue of about 600 million rands. So if any of you have friends or family that have assets outside that they haven't disclosed, here's an opportunity. In South Africa, we have this disease where we want to constantly put in new infrastructure while not spending enough money to maintain existing infrastructure. About 2/3 of the budget is dedicated to realizing social rights in South Africa, which is a huge achievement for all of us. The government is moving towards the next phase of the implementation of the National Health Insurance. We are committed to achieving universal health coverage in line with the vision of the National Development Plan. 11 NHI pilots have yielded valuable insights on which we are now able to build further. These include, firstly, the design of contracts with general practitioners, secondly, more effective chronic medicine dispensing, thirdly, strengthening district health services through clinical specialist teams, ward-based outreach teams, and school health services, and supportive information systems. Where large firms are awarded tenders of 30 million rands or more, 30% of the contract value must go to small or black-owned enterprises where feasible. South African suppliers will enjoy preference in respect of goods with significant local content, thus supporting job creation in South Africa. You have an important contribution to make to transform our society and economy. Own this process, defend your gains, and demand accountability from all. Be an active agent for change.
Brought to you by Discovery Invest, the formula for successful investing.
If anything is going to react quickly to the budget, it is the currency. So any responses to Pravin Gordhan's statements and details during the speech and in the few minutes that we've had after the speech?
Well, it was pretty stable during most of the announcements, sort of in a 1305, 1313 range. The only thing I suppose was later on when he mentioned the Financial Conduct Authority, it started to weaken a little bit. The rand is actually less sensitive to politics than I think a lot of us would like to think.
There was not much of relief to be expected because revenues are tight, and I think he stayed close to where we expected him to stay. So I think it was a fair budget, given the fact that revenues are tight. I think he did quite well.
We were all talking about this is a big hole. We're talking about 28 billion, and then he has to go to that, so he was very clever in terms of how he maneuvered out of that, but still made sure that we are able to say we can plug this gap.
That is really the elephant in the room, is economic growth, if you like.
And if we don't achieve those numbers, we certainly won't achieve the revenues, which will mean that either he's going to have to lower the expenditure ceiling again come time in the mini budget, or we're going to be facing a higher budget deficit than what is predicted at this point.
Talking about decent jobs when unemployment is 26.5%, is the thing that I think maybe is not going to be achieved in this current budget.
There's a subtle shift towards more redistributive type, whether it's on the expenditure side or on the revenue side of it. So you see this subtle shift in terms of economic transformation. Is it radical? I don't think it's radical, not at this stage anyway.
There were no shocks here. It was a steady as she goes budget with some hints at things, but nothing concrete.
Social transformation is going to be an important aspect.
Sound public finances, the health of the financial institutions, investment-grade credit ratings, competitive public procurement. Now, each of these, there's a code and a host of issues behind those terms.
Government's job is not to be the biggest employer. It's to enable the private sector to function well and create those jobs.
If you look at what our deficit is, just over 3% of GDP, that is just about what the public sector wage bill has grown in the last 8 years.
It's not necessarily a positive budget for the bond market because I believe it materially increases the risk of a downgrade over the course of this year. There's a lot of focus on preventing the downgrade, and for that we need growth or we need cuts in expenditure, and this budget unfortunately delivers neither.
That 45% increase in personal tax for people earning more than 1.5 million a year. It could have been lower.
The way that he has increased it, you can see like about between 7 and 10 billion that we will actually collect just from this, or even more, just from the increase that he has proposed.
What it sounds like to me is that they're going to reduce the concessions that we claim on medical aid and other costs, which are already quite constrained. You've got to pay quite a lot on health costs before you can start claiming. It was not like it used to be.
The Department of Health is run very competently, but it also has not been without its controversies in terms of how the public health system is run, which is why people prefer, for most times, if they can afford to go to the private health institutions. So I do think that there's a lot of work the government needs to do to build that credibility, build up the public system, make it attractive for people to want to come for healthcare.
You'd think they would have tried to hammer big business if big business is still so concentrated in white hands and say, you know, too much power, you guys, you've got to pay some more tax, you big corporates. But they didn't.
They didn't, because remember we're talking about encouraging growth as well. That's like very, very important.
Without actually saying it's a wealth tax, we've seen things like we got a new bracket coming in at 45% for earnings above 1.5 million, and that's quite excessive because for every rand that you earn over and above that, 45 cents actually goes to the government and only 55 cents come to you.
We were all calling the personal income tax rate increase. I think some people had been bold enough to put 45 on the table. I don't think we'd seen the dividend withholding coming in conjunction with that, but that obviously is an anti-avoidance provision. Sadly, once again, if we look at the budget, there's a lot of anti-avoidance policy proposals.
South African individuals who are spending more than 183 days outside South Africa. Generally, you would not be paying tax in South Africa, but now the question that you have to ask is to say, do you pay tax anywhere else? Because if you don't pay tax, you're going to be taxed on that. Again, it goes to individuals.
Now, we had this whole fanfare about the Davis Committee beginning of last year. We've had reports from Davis, we've had the second report now, we've had presentations, not mentioned at all. I mean, there's not anything about estate duty going up, about 4Q being scrapped, you know, the rollover relief to spouses, for CGT, for estate duty, for donations tax. That wasn't mentioned at all. So hopefully from our side it's going to go away and just die quite deaf.
We need to be cognizant of when you've got taxes going up on individuals at such increased rates, you've got clients who are going to look and say, well, why must I continue to pay? You know, what am I getting back for it?
It's such a major increase from 41 to 45.
Absolutely. Yeah. What am I getting back for my money? Do I still want to contribute to this economy? Whereas I could go to arguably another country where possibly my tax that I pay will be the same, but what I get back from that particular state is more.
You know, we actually can't take our company tax rate up at all because we're going to lose everything to Mauritius. We're really losing a lot.
I'm here with Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas, and we're going to be talking about the budget speech. So, can you just give me a couple of the key points that we should be taking away from today's budget speech?
I think primarily, I think the message was that we're going through the most difficult period, both globally and in South Africa. Slow growth, high inequality, and a host of problems associated with that. Secondly, that it means that we have to look at how best do we utilize the existing resources. Therefore, the budget was also about fiscal consolidation in a measured way. But secondly, I think it's very clear that the growth that has happened over the last couple of years has not been accompanied with a reduction of inequality. So you've had a situation where the country, in fact, has been in an inequality trap. So we must get ourselves out of that. So there are three probably principal objectives. On the one hand, measured fiscal consolidation, reduce deficit, manage debt, ensure that we reduce expenditure. And at the same time, secondly, we have to ensure that we grow the economy, but we do so in an inclusive manner so that it can have impact on reducing inequality. Huge challenges that probably place major demands on our execution capacity as government.
People, they are stressed. We need to find mechanisms of cutting costs. I still don't understand why we've got three spheres of government.
So are we saying the fundamental flaw of this budget is it's relying too much on revenue, which itself is predicated on assumptions about growth, and apparently little attempt to cut expenditure?
We are feeling as a profession that our taxpayers, our tax practitioners have increased frustration in dealing with SARS. It's not the efficient machine it used to be.
I think for me, we need to look at ways in which we can say, instead of having three spheres of government, perhaps let's have two.
Very interesting as well, the dividends tax went up from today. You don't see that too often.
From today, you don't see that often.
What normally happens?
Normally
it's
it gets
normally
a
from
week, for 1st
of March. So your normal marginal tax increases come from 1st of March.
The breweries, when the excise comes through on the beer, it's instant.
Again, individuals are being squeezed out for tax deductibility for these contributions.
Effect on medical aids? I mean, this punishes them too, doesn't it?
Well, not really. I mean, a medical aid contribution is normally inelastic.
No, but you say to yourself, look, if I'm not getting that concession, I'll scale down my cover. Even though I want the higher cover, I'm going to pay less for cover.
We haven't seen too much of that, thank goodness.
I think we're at a tipping point with wealthy individuals and extracting what we can from them.
Yep.
I think next year we're going to actually go to other taxes like VAT, and he's kept the door open for that in this budget.
Gone as far as you can in milking the
I just thought we knew taxes were going up, but 41 to 45 was a massive increase.
We will be speaking to chief executives to get their views and response to South Africa's 2017 budget.
It's a budget which is really pro-poor. It's a budget where your hands are tied and you've got to make the right decisions. So I think it's a very credible budget, and I think it was a fiscally sound budget.
Given the tough economic times we're having, and with not much space to move around, the minister did fairly well.
The largest employers is obviously government. But outside of that, it's really SMEs, small, medium-sized enterprises. That's 75% literally of businesses. So the question you ask is, can more be done between government and private sector to encourage SME growth? The answer is undeniably yes.
Collaboration between the public and the private sector. I mean, the private sector has incubators, accelerators, capacity builders. So how do we ensure that, those facilities that we have and that are doing pretty well in nurturing a pipeline of healthy SMEs that can contribute towards economic growth, that we actually work quite closely with the government to access all that has been said is available for SMEs.
The slump we had in our economy pretty much reflects global reality in part. It also, of course, reflects our own structural weaknesses in the economy. I think fiscal policy has a role to play, in terms of where do we allocate resources for what, and how do we use those resources. But by and large, I think everybody is bleeding globally. And obviously, we have our unique structural challenges that we have to address. We do need major economic reform as a country. And it's not just fiscal policy.
You have to have a conduit between the public and the private sector, and civil society organizations and other private sector institutions tend to be a good conduit that will create that balance.
That everybody needs to have some sacrifice in order to get through this period and re-establish growth going forward and maintain the centre. That's what I think he's done. He's charted that course.
I think Minister actually taxing the higher income bracket is in line with the wealth redistribution that they want to see, especially with the middle class in South Africa that is getting left behind and that is not growing fast enough for us to realize the transformation and wealth redistribution that we wanted to see in the country.
I definitely think they are targeting the wealthier aspect of our population.
One of the positive things that come out of the budget is, if you were to look at it in a positive light, is because tax rates have gone up by quite significantly for those who are saving. Saving actually becomes far more attractive than it ever was before.
Okay, maybe let me agree and disagree. So maybe they don't wake up saying that today I'm going to save, but I don't think people wake up saying I want to be in a financially vulnerable position. But unfortunately the stats show that 75% of South Africans don't have enough money to save at the end of the month.
The general person in the street will say, well, with the increase in the cost of living, how can I actually afford to put money away?
I don't know how much of an impact raising the threshold, the transfer duty threshold to 900,000 will have, because those first-time homeowners that usually transact in the 600k to 900k space, how much of an ability to enter into a favourable home loan agreement do they have, or will those properties be taken up by the wealthy in terms of 2 or 3 units at a time to rent out?
We need to grow labour-intensive industries. We need better support of government for labour-intensive industries. We need to grow our agriculture, we need to grow agro-processing, but also we need to, mining is not yet an industry in decline, so we must do something to sustain our mining sector, continue to support it. Manufacturing will always be the backbone of this economy. We need better support instruments for manufacturing. Finally, I think education and training. We must improve outcomes in basic education. We must improve support for early childhood development. And those are some of the measures that have huge impact, that would have huge impact both on growth and reduction of inequality.
Brought to you by Discovery.